and they want to ensure that that brand is sustained. For those who is privileged to be admitted, it's over. I know where my PhD thesis is. Sometimes I don't even bother. I just look at it and I pass by and I go. Recently, somebody asked me to send him a sample of my PhD. I said, "Oh, you will not be disappointed when you collect that sample." Because even me, when I look at it, sometimes I'll be wondering, am I the one who wrote this thing? After 4 years of suffering, so this is what I came up with. And what that means is that there's nothing you want to write that is going to be the best. You can't write a perfect thesis. Just write a thesis necessary to push you towards getting the PhD. Nothing you can't, what do you want to write that will be the best? Just do your best. Usually the academy will say once you meet up to minimum standard, they don't allow you to go because you have added value to yourself and you have added value to the society. Therefore, just get this PhD and proceed. And to get it, you would have also passed through some purification process, which they feel is good enough. So please just put in your best, be in constant touch with your supervisors, and consistent. I'm telling you, you'll finish this thing in less than 3 years. Just consistency is all that we need. And like I said, some people are very good. They are very good when it comes to talking, oratory. Some people are good when it comes to writing. The PhD program requires that you should be good in both. You should be good in writing and good in talking. But for now, keep your talking skill somewhere, activate the writing skill, and write. The final day of your defense, they will not give you more than 20 minutes to speak. So just 20 minutes. If you like, give us 1,000 pages. We will not allow you to speak for more than 20 minutes. You could even be asked to speak for 15 minutes. And so it means all you need to do is just to summarize that work in 15 minutes. The next will be, if the external examiner needs some clarification, he will ask you, then you answer. That's all, and you are done. So for now, I think what we need most especially is that skill to write. And I tell you, there's no big deal. You can learn it. You can learn it with consistency, 2, 3 paragraphs, 4 paragraphs. You'll be able to write this thing. And I see PhD holders who can write it in this class. Yes. Okay, so without wasting much of our time, we'll just go straight into the business of today, which is the project clinic, to guide us as to how to write a project. The research methodology you are offering as a course is not what any student should be struggling to get an A or B. It is a course that is meant to prepare you towards writing your project. So don't approach it like you want to pass with an A. That A may be useless if you can't write the project. So get equipped with the skill you need to have to write the thesis. And to write a thesis, the first important question everybody should ask himself or herself is, what is the structure of a thesis? And one challenge I've observed over time is that sometimes even when teachers give students assignments, the students are lost because they don't even know what is the structure of the assignment that they have been given. You have all the ideas, but you don't know where to fix A or where to fix B. And so structure is very key. They ask you, for instance, to write a synopsis. What is the structure of a synopsis? They ask you to write a proposal. What is the structure and component of a proposal? Until you're able to identify these things, then you will not be able to write it. So for a project, there are structures that you need to know. And once you identify those structures, every other thing is now to start filling in the gap. Yes, like what we do in school, we fill in the gap, right? Identify the structure and begin to fill in the gap. So today we are going to look at those structures, then we'll begin to fill in the gap. Okay? Then I'll try as much as I can to make the class more practical because this writing is practical. Okay, so we'll try to minimize theory. So just write structure of a thesis, since this is a PhD class. Structure of a thesis. A PhD thesis is structured into 6 chapters. A PhD thesis is structured into 6 chapters. A PhD thesis is structured into 6 chapters. And each chapter must have a title. A PhD thesis is structured into 6 chapters, and each chapter must have a title. If you are assigned to me as your supervisee or as your supervisor, the first thing I'll ask you, if I agree with the topic you have brought, I'll ask you to go and bring the structure of your work. It will tell me whether or not the student knows the direction he or she wants to go. Now I saw somebody sent me, I think it was Tony, sent me the Google Map direction. In case I don't know here, the Google Map will lead me here. That structure is a Google Map. If you have the right Google Map, you get to the destination. You don't have the right Google Map, you will not get to the destination. And so if I supervise you, I look at it and I say, no, this structure, something is wrong. Then we work on the structure before you now go to writing the work. Remember, each chapter must have a title. And so even when you are designing that your structure, you say, this is my chapter. What is the title of this chapter? And the content of that chapter should not contradict the title of the chapter. Somebody said his title is Overview of Boko Haram, but we see the person discussing banditry inside the work or inside that chapter. It means that person is already derailing from the central theme of his chapter. Okay, so let's look at chapter 1. Write chapter 1. Chapter 1 is titled Introduction. Is titled Introduction. Okay? It's titled Introduction. You know, usually you write chapter 1, you centralize it on your MS page. Below it, you now say Introduction, also centralized. Then you move 1.1. 1.1, background to the study. Background to the study. 1.2, statement of the problem. Statement of the problem. 1.3, research questions. Research questions. 1.4, objective of the study. Objective of the study. 1.5, significance of the study. Significance of the study. 1.6, research propositions. Research propositions / assumptions. So you choose whether you want to call it research assumptions or you want to call it research propositions. Okay? That's 1. What?
6.
1.6. 1.7, scope. Scope and limitation of the study. Scope and limitations of the study. Scope and limitations of the study. 1.8, definition of terms. Definition of terms. 1.9, organization of the study. Organization of the study. That's the component of your chapter 1. And I put it to you, I'm not a lawyer, but I put it to you that in the next 1 hour, everybody in this class can finish chapter 1 of their project. Everybody can finish chapter 1 of their project. This is a journey that will take you 2 years, and we are saying in less than 1 hour we can minus 1 chapter. We now have 5 more chapters to focus on.
That will take 2 years.
Those 5 chapters as well, you can, I tell students, if I have 6 chapters, my target is that in condenses 2 months of my chapter 1 into the others. So it means I should use 8 or 7 months to finish the project. In fact, my all you need is time. And it's very simple, and you will see that. Okay?
So you are going on and on.
Chapter 2, you and
Hello, sir.
theoretical framework. Yes, please.
Yeah, it's like your network is going on off and on. At the point we normally lose you.
Chapter 2 is titled what? Literature review and theoretical framework. Full stop. 2.1 literature review. 2.1.1 your supervisor can decide to change, but just know that whatever we have, he will not go against it. Okay. 2.1 we said what? Literature review. 2.1.1 conceptual review. Conceptual review. Conceptual review. 2.1 point what? 2 empirical review. Empirical review. 2.2 theoretical framework. Theoretical framework.
2.1.
2.2 now. 2.2.
Okay, 2.1.
Theoretical framework. Now, this session is not rigid. A lot can change about it, but when we explain it, regardless of whatever changes, your content. Okay, let's go back to chapter. Okay, do cycle it not like a circle. Go to the front, draw like a half square, right? Draw from 1.1, bring it down, and link it to 1.9, right? 1.1 is what? Background to in front of study. Move your barrel like this, bring it down, and join it up. No. How do I explain that? Background to the study ends here, right? Yeah. I put my pen down and join it to one organization of study. Okay? Right beside that box that you have just drawn, 12 to 15 pages. 12 to 15 pages. That means if a student writes your chapter 1 and you have more than 15 pages, something is already going wrong. Okay? It's going to overfloat. You know when your car is overfloating? It's good to have fuel, but when the fuel begins to overfloat, it becomes a problem. So please, in case you have too much fuel, don't let that chapter 1 overflow.
But at what font? Because
At what font? Font 12.
12.
Yes, and double spacing.
Double spacing.
Yes. So you see, the double spacing alone also helps to increase the quantity. So font 12 times New Roman. Okay? Yes. Are we there? Go to that literature chapter 2, do the same thing from 2.1, drag to the last one. Yes. And write 60 to 70 pages.
Sorry, sir, I didn't get you, sir. I didn't get you, sir. Can you repeat?
60 to 70 pages.
50 to 70.
For which one, sir?
I'm sure it must be Alex. It must be Alex.
60 to 70 pages.
For literature review, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes. Okay, are we there?
Yes.
Chapter 3. Chapter 3. Chapter 3 is titled Research Methodology. Chapter 3 is titled Research Methodology. It's titled Research Methodology, and it contains the following. 3.1 Research Philosophy. Research philosophy.
Ah,
3.4 Sample size.
sir. You are cutting, sir. Please, can you go back to 3.2 again, sir?
3.2
Well,
Research
just start
design.
from 3 from the beginning. Please start 3 from the beginning. Yeah, I couldn't hear you from this end, please. My apologies.
3.1
Yes, sir.
Research Philosophy.
Thank you.
Research Philosophy. 3.1. 3.2 3.2 Research Design. 3.3 Population of the study. 3.4 Sample size and sampling techniques. Sample size and sampling techniques. Sample size and sampling techniques.
Please, sir. 3.3, sir. 3.3.
We take on we need to maximize everything.
3.3. 3.3.
3.4. We said is what?
Sample size and sampling technique.
3.5.
3.3, sir. Please, sir. There was noise at the background. Yes, sir.
3.3.
I think we'll later disconnect this online.
Please, sir. Please don't disconnect us, sir. Please, sir.
We're not disconnecting you. Want to put in caption so you can read through at least if you're not following us.
They had that one clearly.
So you can read through the caption. Yeah.
3.1, we said is research philosophy. 3.2, research design. 3.3, we said population of the study. 3.4, we said sampling size and what? Sampling techniques. Okay, 3.5, method of data collection. Method of data collection. 3.6, 3.6, method of data analysis. Method of data analysis. 3.7, research ethics. Research ethics. 3.8, methodological limitations. Methodological limitations. That's all for chapter 3.
How many pages?
Less than.
Okay? For that methodology, do the same thing. 14 to 20 pages. You will hardly have 20 pages. 14 to 20 pages. Okay? Chapter 4. Chapter 4. Chapter 4 is usually titled An Overview. Chapter 4 is usually titled An Overview. So whatever your topic is on, do an overview of that thing. Okay? Do an overview of that thing. Okay? We will adopt a topic and we'll do an overview. Okay? The topic is terrorism. Just write it somewhere in one corner. Terrorism and gender-based violence in Northeast. That's the topic. Terrorism and gender-based violence. Okay? So what will be the title of my chapter 4? An overview of terrorism and gender-based violence. Very simple. Your work is on maybe the judiciary and counter-terrorism. That chapter 4 will be an overview of the judiciary and counter-terrorism. Right? So it means that whoever reads that chapter should have a general knowledge about terrorism, about gender-based violence, or about the judiciary and counter-terrorism. In fact, it's one topic that I want to write, but too much work will not allow me to sit down. I think the judiciary has a critical role to play in countering insurgency, but I'm not seeing them playing that role. The guy who masterminded the Nyanya bomb blast up to today, he has not been. Nyanya bomb blast, well, how many years ago?
14 years. No, not 14 years. 8 years ago.
But the old legal system. This is the legal system.
In fact, yeah, that's why we're saying the judiciary.
That's why it's the judiciary.
Okay, legal system, judiciary, you will be fine at the end of this year. Okay? Can the legal system work without the judiciary? We have different laws. Now we have laws against terrorism, but how far is that law effective? The judiciary have a role to play. And I think it's a very beautiful topic that all those lawyers in this class may be thinking towards that direction. Every reader should find it very, very interesting. The first thing I will call to them is, what is the business of the judiciary and counter-terrorism? They will now begin to see. If terrorism itself is against the law, then it is only the law that can tell us the punishment due for terrorists. And it will make a very interesting read. I am looking forward to a day where people in this class will not just finish their PhD, but that whatever topic you have picked, we are going to convert it into a book. And after you do your external defense, we are going to do a public presentation of that book. That's what I look forward to. Remember that at the end of the day, you are not just going to be an expert in defense and security studies or in leadership and strategic studies, but a more superior expert on that subject. One different level, not to take down notes, but to drink wine and rejoice for getting to our destination. Okay, so let's take, for instance, chapter 4, we say overview of terrorism and what? Gender-based violence. 4.1. Origin of terrorism in Nigeria. Origin of terrorism in Nigeria. Now, I want us to take note. In your own topic, you may not need origin. Somebody cannot say origin of Nigeria's judiciary. It means you have to take us back to 1960 when we took over from the colony.
Yes.
It will be too much of a thing. Origin of terrorism. 4.2. Drivers of terrorism in Nigeria. Drivers. That's what some people will call causes. Okay? Drivers of terrorism in Nigeria. 4.3. Strategies of terrorism. Strategies of terrorism. You can't be telling us an overview without telling us their modus operandi. Strategies of terrorism. 4.4. Terrorism financing in Nigeria. How do they get their money? How do they get all these logistics? How much is one AK-47? Yet you see terrorists carrying RPG, carrying gun truck, carrying all these things. Where do they get that money? Your project will tell you. Okay. 4 point what now? 5. Ideology of terrorism. Ideology of terrorism. 4.6. Terrorism and gender-based violence. Terrorism and gender-based violence. Simple. A while ago I said the content of your work should not deviate from the title of that chapter. And you need to be conscious of that. And that's why if you understand your topic clearly, you will not be digressing. Today I supervised a project on interagency collaboration in the fight against banditry, and the person used Kaduna as a case study. When I was reading the person's work, I was seeing interagency collaboration in the fight against terrorism in the Northeast. More than 40 pages is talking Northeast. And I asked, but where's the Kaduna that you say you're talking about? I can't see banditry. I'm just seeing terrorism everywhere. Please let the title of that chapter be your guide. Okay? That is of our chapter 4. Now let's rule the same way. 50 pages and above. 50 pages and above. Yes. Okay. How many items do we have in that chapter 4? 4.6. So imagine that each of them, I give them 8 pages. It's very simple. Yes. That'll be 48, right? So it's still within the very close bracket. Only on strategies of terrorism, 8 pages may even look a little small. Right? Then we're talking about, finally, the last one said terrorism and gender-based. There's a lot to write. And like I said, you are not writing this thing from your head. The literature is there. Have you not seen people who are rescued and they are coming with children? Yeah. Some are coming with pregnancy. Have you not seen girls who are suicide bombers? That's terrorism and gender-based violence. And to worsen the matter, we have even seen IDP, not just to terrorists now, but even to JTF and even some soldiers. That's still gender-based violence. In this instance, not perpetrated by the terrorists, but perpetrated by soldiers. But if those terrorists did not make them internally displaced, beautiful. There's a lot of literature from UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. A lot of literature from UNICEF, a lot. Chapter 5. Chapter 5 is usually titled Data Presentation, Analysis, and Interpretation. Data presentation, analysis, and interpretation. Now, we're trying to modify that chapter now, even though the content will be the same. We now say, why just say data presentation, analysis, and interpretation of what? Right? Now, let me say this to you. That chapter is one of the most important chapters in your entire project. It is in that chapter that we will know that all the research questions you had from the beginning, an objective you set out for yourself, were you able to handle them? And what is the outcome of those questions that you said you were going to ask? And so that chapter so your supervisor will guide you. Data presentation, analysis, and interpretation on the judiciary and counter-terrorism, depending on whatever your topic is. Are we together? 5.1, data presentation. Data presentation. (5.2) Data analysis and interpretation. If you like, interpretation and analysis. Data interpretation and analysis. 5.3 discussion on findings. Discussion on findings. Sometimes we call it discussion of findings. How do you handle that chapter if you have not found out anything? So you must find out something. Discussion of findings. Okay? And that's all for chapter 5. Okay? Let's rule it out. 25 pages. 25 pages. And you know this 25 pages not from your head. And the answers, you have all the raw material to put. And under that, you are not afraid of plagiarism or anything, because it is what you got from the field you are downloading there. So it's very simple. Chapter 6. Chapter is usually the conclusive chapter. It's usually the conclusive chapter, or some people say the concluding chapter. And it is titled Summary, Conclusion, and Recommendations. That S must be there. Conclusion and recommendations. 6.1 summary. 6.2 conclusion. Some students will say conclusions. Summary. Okay, there's no conclusions.
Conclusion.
Yes. 6.1 summary. 6.2 conclusion. 6.3 recommendations. Then just put references. References. It doesn't have number. Okay. References. Then below references, put appendix. Appendix. Some of the interviews you'll be doing, you'll be snapping, and you put those pictures behind. You went to do a focus group discussion, you snap, put it in your appendix. You went to an IDP camp, you snapped where you were feeding them, put it in the appendix. These are evidence that you did the job. I don't know if it was this class I told my story, where on the day of my seminar, I now quoted Bishop Kuka Hassan, and the professor said it's a lie. I told you in this class, right?
Yes, sir.
I told it's a lie. He has been looking for Kuka for more than 6 months. I have not been able to see Kuka. And I was quoting Kuka's, copiously in the work. In an interview with Kuka on this, Kuka maintained that I will put a paragraph. Plenty. I know. I said, no, this guy, you are doctoring this thing. I had to now send them evidence of the pictures I took with Kuka. Imagine that I already had them at the back in my appendix. I'll just say, sir, please refer to page this and cases. That almost cost me some suspense, some delay until I brought evidence, gave to my supervisor. He shared it on his class platform, and they saw it there. And I have the audio till today on my laptop. Okay. This, in summary, is the structure of a PhD thesis in NDA. I said in NDA because the structure may be different elsewhere. But regardless of the differences, once you can do this, you can do it anywhere. Yes, please. Okay, that last one. It cannot be more than 8 pages. You can't have more than 8 pages.
You don't usually count the references.
Yes, minus references. Up to 6.1 to 6.3, 8 pages. 2, 3. It cannot even be more than, it cannot be up to. Yes, your summary can be like a page and a half or 2 maximum. Your conclusion cannot be more than 1 page. Your recommendations, like half a page. So that's max. Yes. Once you won't get beyond 5, just know that you are beginning to put in irrelevant things. Okay. Are we together? Can somebody help us sum up all those pages? How many pages do we now have in all? I just want total. How many? Chapter 1, how many?
Lower limits.
If I, for instance, literature review.
Okay, use for literature. We use the highest limit.
70. What is the highest? 70. 70. No, I use 15. Let's start from one hundred. No. 188.
188 pages. Okay, 188 pages. If I add my reference of like 15 pages, I already have 200 pages. I put all my appendix, my questionnaire, I attach it as appendix. The pictures I attach as appendix. So, minimum target for your PhD work is 200 pages. That's the target you should set for yourself. Minimum. Sometimes the examiner will just quickly look at the last page and say, 150. How can this person get PhD with 150 pages? When some of our master students have 150 pages. At least let them see 200, and even if it's 205 or 201, let it cross that. Okay. So let's start the business proper. Preferably in the appendix. Okay, you can refer to page of the appendix. Okay. Yes, please. It's APA. Now we have APA 7th edition. Okay, APA 7th edition. Now I used to tell students, if I were, I don't know, it's just part of the fact that social science is an extension of imperialism. If I'm the one who is in position, I don't care about what edition, I don't care about what reference style. I just want to see that you took somebody's paragraph and you acknowledge the person and you put it at the back. So if I need that person's book, I can go and find it, right? But in NDA and in most schools now in Nigeria, it is upper 7th edition. Now let me tell you, you don't need to bother yourself asking yourself, what is this upper 7th edition? When you get there, just type upper 7th edition, example of upper 7th edition for a book. Google will give it to you. Example of upper 7th edition for a journal, it will give it to you. All I need to do, if I can get one of a book, one of a journal, one of an edited book, one of a newspaper, all the ones I have, I'll begin to convert them. Because you already have all the information, the difference is the arrangement. Somebody who see the number before the abbreviation of his middle name and his first name. In some references, you will see the 2020 at the end. After the title of the book, it will now be at the end. Appa is saying, as soon as you give us the surname, abbreviate the other names, tell us the year the book was published, followed by the title of the book, then the place of publication, then the publisher. If I say Adejo S 2020, Fundamentals of Strategic Studies, Kaduna, that's the place of publication. I'll now say Daily Graphics, for instance, that is the publisher. And that's all. But you know, when you quote a paper written by Adejo in an edited book, you know, an edited book, in an edited book, the people you see as the authors, they are editors. It means that all the chapters in the book was not written by them. They only assembled, I say, you write one, you write. I put all together, edit it, and I publish it. In that instance, you may see Bukola in the work, but Bukola is not the editor of the work, but she has a title in the work, right? The reference style is also different. But all these things, once you get 111, the remaining is just bygone. Okay? So having said that, ladies and gentlemen, let's begin to do business. Let's go practical now. Chapter 1. We're going to write a project now. That's what we're going to do. But it's going to be a summary of a project. Okay? And we'll get to the point where all the confusion will end. Chapter 1. What's the title of chapter 1? So let's go. Chapter 1, then under it writes Introduction. 1.1. Background to the study. Background to the study. When you are writing those things, don't write in capital letters, okay? You can only write the title of the chapter in capital letter, like say chapter 1 in capital letter. The introduction is not in capital letter. It's one, what do they call it? Initial capital. The same thing for your title. Make sure all the title have initial capital. Background, capital letter B. Study, capital letter S. Okay? Statement or problem, capital letter S, capital letter P, like that. The remaining are lower cases. Okay? And you make sure that they are all bolded. Okay? Each subheading and title of a chapter should be bold. Okay? Let's write. Remember our topic: terrorism and gender-based violence. I always tell students, now because we have a structure and we have said that chapter 1 should be between 12 and what? 15 pages, right? Before I start, what I'm going to tell myself is how many pages am I going to put in 1.1, in 1.2 to get my 15 or 12 pages? Don't write that 1.1 more than 3 pages. Okay? That 1.1 should not be more than 3 pages. 1.2 should not be more than 3 pages. So if I have 3 pages, I already have how many? 6 pages, right? The remaining 1.3, 1.4, I'll accommodate them in another 3, 4 pages. And I'll end up getting my 12 pages. Okay? So let's go there. Globally, we're writing a project now. I don't know who we're going to dash the project when we finish.
Me.
Globally,
Me. Oh.
globally, terrorism has been a major threat. Globally, terrorism has been a major threat. As there is no continent, that is not grappling with one form of terrorism or the other. As there is no continent that is not grappling with one form of terrorism or the other. Full stop. The September 11 attack in the US. The September 11 attack in the US brought to limelight the implication of terrorism on international security. The implication of terrorism on international security. Full stop. Africa, in the post-colonial era, some persons will call it post-colonial Africa, okay? Africa in the post-colonial era has been grappling with different manifestations of insecurity. With different manifestations of insecurity. With different manifestations of insecurities, ranging from banditry, civil wars, resource conflicts, ethno-religious crisis, secessionist agitations, secessionist agitations, and terrorism. Open brackets, Agbako 2015.
Agbako.
2015, close the bracket, full stop. Mutiu, continue. Mutiu, 2010. Mutiu 2010 claims that the degree of political instability in Africa, vis-a-vis its implication for Africa's economy, cannot be unconnected. Yes, African economy cannot be unconnected with the activities of terrorism. Full stop. Paragraph. Nigeria is the giant of Africa. Nigeria is a giant of Africa and it's not left out. Nigeria is a giant of Africa and it is not left out from the activities of terrorists. And it's not left out from the activities of terrorists. Full stop. Since 2009, Boko Haram has been a major security threat to Nigeria. Since 2009, Boko Haram has been a major security threat to Nigeria. Open brackets, TAR 2014. Close the brackets. Are we there? Terrorism has impact on national security. Terrorism has impact on national security. Terrorism has impact on national security, socio-economic implications, and gender-based violence. Full stop. Like most conflicts, women and children, are most vulnerable. Like most conflicts, women and children are the most vulnerable. Full stop. The activities of terrorists is such that women have become tools or spoils, SPOILS, or spoils of war, as they are either being kidnapped, raped, forcefully married, sold into slavery, or used as suicide bombers. Open brackets, Mukhtar, 2012. The increasing attack on schools, the kidnapping of female students, and the hostage of women and girls by terrorists, shows the nexus between terrorism and gender-based violence. Shows the nexus between terrorism and gender-based violence. Shows the nexus between terrorism and gender-based violence. Full stop. Shows the nexus between terrorism and gender-based. Okay? Now, this is just a sample of what your background should look like, right? Now, this one is written from the head. Imagine when I have plenty literature on this, on that, right? All the names we are quoting is assumed that we're picking from people's work. Are we together?
Yes, sir.
Now, one mistake students make is to keep writing and keep citing names without banking those names in your reference session. The greatest disservice you will do for yourself is to write up to 4 pages. And you now say later, you now go and be checking page 1 where you mention tar. You now go and look for where is the source of tar. It's going to be more difficult than writing your project. So if I'm writing a project and I'm on my normal Microsoft title with reference and minimize. As I'm quoting tar, I saw one beautiful article by tar. As I take that paragraph and put in my work and cite tar, I'll go back to my reference session and put the reference there. I will not pick a name and I will not put it in my reference. You know, if you put the reference below, you have to be going up and down. I don't need that. I create a different page for it. When I'm done with the work, the reference may not be upper style, may not be anything, but let it just be there. When I'm done, I'll now pick it and start converting it to upper style. Yes, please.
Like this, the way you quoted about 2015.
Yes.
Does it mean that from the beginning of the work,
Yes.
where you quoted?
Beautiful.
Yes.
No, it means that the paragraph before the name is sourced from that person.
Okay.
Yes. But sometimes we always tell students avoid short paragraphs. So the first paragraph is my word. The second paragraph is Abaco's. But I can't put only that my word, 1 4 line, and put Abaco 4 line. The work will look untidy. I will join it up with my own. But the argument is that even if Agbako sees my project and sees that she's mentioned or he's mentioned there, all he needs to do is to say, okay, after all this paragraph, my word starts from here.
Yeah.
It's not the entire work that you know. And for you, you have fulfilled the ethics of research. You took somebody's paragraph and you cited the person. That's all. Okay? And you can end a paragraph with the citation or you start a paragraph with it. If you see somewhere we say according to, it means you are starting. In some places, we just end with the name and the year in the brackets. But if you are starting with, the name is not in the brackets, it's only the year. According to tar is standing, it is the year I'll put in brackets. But if I'm ending it with tar, both tar and the year will be in the brackets. Yes, okay?
Okay, like now, this with you.
Yes. Not in brackets. Okay.
So it's possible that all these you just pick people's words, what they have published elsewhere. So the plagiarism test, how do you serious test?
No, beautiful. I want to write 2 pages of my background. And in that background, I have in all maybe 12 paragraphs in that 2 pages. Out of the 12 paragraphs, 4 to 5 paragraphs are mine. Then let's say another 6 paragraphs are not mine. You will not fail the plagiarism check. You fail the plagiarism check when the first paragraph is not your own, second is not your own, third is not your own, fourth is not your own. It will not that you fail, it will show a higher rate of plagiarism. Check is not an ideal checker of plagiarism. Plagiarism simply means citing somebody's work without acknowledging. But I cited your work and I acknowledge it. That checker will highlight it. Okay, so we are beginning to look and say this is not plagiarism. But by the time I check, sometimes what we do, if I read your work, I can tell Sometimes I'll tell the students in the project, I can't find you in this work. It means that you are just helping me to find other people, but yourself, I cannot find. How do I find you? I should see some paragraphs without citation. I will know that you are the one who said those things.
So in some instances, if you put somebody's work into do,
Yes.
the plagiarism will kind of show it. But if you except you paraphrase it, then that is the only way you can.
Beautiful.
Well, I don't know if it's.
That's correct. When you paraphrase, it reduces also the plagiarism level. Now, I could see a quotation by Mutar. All I need to do is to look at his quotation, very key, and I don't want to cite Mutar. I will paraphrase it and I will not even mention him because it's not my word, right? It's my word. Now, another thing about the plagiarism checker is that because it's an online resource, any name that exists in the cyberspace, if that checker sees it, it will grab it. Because the name exists. One way I can also minimize plagiarism is to also minimize online resources. Right? I can go, maybe I'm writing on the judiciary. There are plenty very interesting books, gazette, all manner of documents. If you check online from morning till tomorrow, you will not see it. Those kind of documents, even if I take 2 pages, the plagiarism checker will not see it. Are we together? Yes. So try to minimize online sources. Okay, you can get books that you are sure they are not online, but that should not also encourage you to now begin to just be copying and pasting, right? One day, very soon, we are going to fight this plagiarism checker because it is not checking plagiarism. Even if I have 12 paragraphs and the 12 paragraphs are not my own, I don't have one inside. As long as I didn't lift the 12 paragraph on one book, I picked the 12 paragraphs from 12 different books. It's not supposed to be plagiarism, right? Because it will take me pain to read 5 pages or 10 pages of your work, and I got only 1 paragraph from there. I read 20 pages of his work, I got only 2 paragraphs from there. It's a lot.
But if it is cited, if you cite, you
Acknowledge.
that. Then it's not.
That's what I'm saying. That's why we are challenging the plagiarism. So when you put it, the checker will give you the summary. If you see 40%, it means you should go back and begin to reparaphrase some things, and it will drop. Okay, but that you should bring 0%. Nobody can get that. Okay, somebody was raising hand there.
Yes, I want to say that I was very excited and impressed in the sequence of which the work went.
Okay.
I saw you took a global view, and then you narrowed to Africa, and from Africa you to Nigeria.
Yes.
And from Nigeria, if I was writing about Kaduna, then I was going to Kaduna to also carry something from there.
Beautiful.
And if I was also talking about a village in Kaduna, something has happened, I will end in that village.
Beautiful.
So for me, that was very impressive.
Thank you very much. And that's very key for an introduction, for your background. The phenomenon is not peculiar to one country or to one locality. Start from a global perspective. Don't dwell so much there, but at least give us a global perspective. As I was even giving that, I was seeing the limitation of what I'm giving. I expect that the students should have mentioned different terrorists in Africa, Al-Shabaab, all of those things. We should see those things. But this is a sample. Okay, this is a sample. Some paragraphs we talk about Al-Shabaab, some talk about Al-Qaeda, some talk about Al-Qaeda, and all of that. Right? Okay. Yes, please.
So Microsoft Word has automated referencing. So I know how to do it. So if you give me some time, I can help you through that. So any book you get, you just record it there, and whichever format you want, upper, whatever, you just select and it will change it. Even midway through your writing.
Very
So
simple.
if you give me time, I can help you to do it.
Beautiful.
But you have it already online, you can just upload it. I have learned from there and I'm using it from you. I learned from you online.
Thank
So
you.
you can still post that
Yeah, I can do another one.
Okay, please. That's very good. So please let's make use of available resources to make the job easier. You know, it's like those days you want to do your bibliography. You go and start looking for all the A's. You go and copy and paste, copy and paste. You now go back and start B. Now computer has made it easy. Just highlight everything and you click on the alphabetical order and it will just arrange it for you. Right? Even now there's a program called Grammarly also. Just put your work inside and it will help you highlight grammatical errors. If you like, you think it's correct, you accept it and you're making progress. There's what? Quillboard.
Yes, it helps in paraphrase.
Well, you can imagine.
Somebody.
Quill. Okay, Quill. So you say a lot is changing. And what those guys do, sometimes your work shows that plagiarism is 40%. And what did I say? That you should go and reparaphrase. And you have that software, carry the work and put inside that software to help you reparaphrase. And the check results will reduce. Right? But I always encourage you that once you allow that device to help you paraphrase, also go and read through again so that it doesn't now begin to lose the meaning of the work. Okay? That's one small disadvantage that it has. It can change the meaning for you completely. Okay? 1.2 Statement of problem. We have noted the pattern of that 1.1. I want you to note this very importantly. Statement of the problem.
This from chapter 1 introduction, no underlining.
No, we don't underline. Completely, there's no underlining in the entire work. Yes. No. Okay. Paragraph 1.2. Since 2009, terrorism has been a major security threat to Nigeria. Since 2009, terrorism has been a major threat to Nigeria. Terrorism has been a major threat to Nigeria. A major security threat to Nigeria. And the government have adopted different counter-terrorism strategies. And the government has adopted different counter-terrorism strategies. Both kinetic and non-kinetic strategies. Counter-terrorism strategies, both kinetic and non-kinetic. Full stop. Several works exist. Several works. Work like work with S, works. Several works exist on terrorism in Nigeria. Several work exists on terrorism in Nigeria, especially in relation to its impact on national security. Several works exist on terrorism in Nigeria, especially on its what?
Relationship.
To what?
To its impact on national security.
Especially in relation to its impact on what? National security. 2014, semicolon, semicolon. Ibrahim, 2012. Yes, Ibrahim, 2012 in brackets, but Ibrahim not in brackets, semicolon. Adejo, 2014, column, sorry, semicolon. Chinedu, 2016. Chinedu, 2016. Full stop. When a reader sees that, it means that the reader recalls the last line before you began to mention those names. What that tells the reader is that these names you have mentioned have written something on the relationship between terrorism and national security. Are we together? Okay, full stop. Some other scholars, yes, please.
When you mentioned 2014,
Yes.
semicolon,
Yes.
then Ibrahim, you said 2012 in bracket. Why is that 2012 in bracket? All of them.
They are all in bracket. All the years are in brackets. Anything, any year call, just a sample.
Okay, the years are in bracket.
Are we together?
Yeah.
What's the last line? Some other scholars have examined the nexus between terrorism and Nigeria's external relations. The nexus between terrorism and Nigeria's external relations. Nexus between terrorism and Nigeria's external relations. Full stop. According to Mustafa, the activities of Boko Haram. Okay, sorry, put a date, please. According to Mustafa, put any dates there. In bracket, yes. The activities of terrorists, the activities of Boko Haram has not only affected Nigeria's image globally, has not only affected Nigeria's image globally.
Sorry, sir.
Yes,
I noticed it suddenly switching to Boko Haram instead of terrorism.
yes, was it talking terrorism? Yes. Has not only what?
Nigeria image
Globally. It has affected. It has affected. It has affected the posture of Nigeria. It has affected the posture of Nigeria within the Committee of Nations. Within the Committee of Nations. Within the Committee of Nations. Full stop. The role played by Nigeria in Africa's security, vis-a-vis the big brother Africa, vis-a-vis the big brother Africa perception of Nigeria, vis-a-vis the big brother perception of Nigeria, vis-a-vis the big brother perception of Nigeria is gradually being eroded. Courtesy of Boko Haram. open brackets, Biola 2012.
Viola
2012. Paragraph. Boko Haram has led to loss of lives and properties. Boko Haram has led to loss of lives and properties, comma, led to loss of lives and properties, comma, refugee crisis, refugee crisis, refugee crisis, comma, internally displaced persons, internally displaced persons, and gender-based violence, and gender-based violence. Full stop. Though scholars have examined, those scholars have examined the nexus between terrorism and humanitarian crisis. Those scholars have examined the nexus between terrorism and humanitarian crisis. Mustafa, Mustafa, 2012, semicolon, Onoha, 2014, Onoha, 2014, semicolon, Patrick, 2012, etc. Little or no attention, little or no attention is given to interrogating, little or no attention is given to interrogating the impact of terrorism on women. Little or no attention is given to the impact of terrorism on women, or if you like, on the female gender. Are we together? Full stop. More often than not, women are most vulnerable. More often than not, women are most vulnerable. Women are most vulnerable, comma, they are kidnapped. They are kidnapped, comma, forcefully married, comma, killed, comma, raped, and used for suicide bombing. And full stop. This work, therefore, is an attempt. This work, therefore, is an attempt to examine terrorism and gender-based violence. This work, therefore, is an attempt to examine terrorism and gender-based violence. Terrorism and gender-based violence. That takes care of the statement of problem. What is unique about statement of problem is the fact that the writer is able to say what exists on the subject and gap that exists on the subject, which is why the researcher wants to write on that. Okay? 2 pages, 3 pages max, we are good to go. The more you write, the more you begin to lose the flow and the coherence. When you are done with talking about impact of terrorism, you are done telling us what others have done about terrorism, move to the key issue and tell us what. And sometimes you look at the statement, it's carefully selected. It wants a little. Go back to that line.
Little or no attention is given.
Beautiful. The word did not say no attention. Because sometimes the teacher will tell you, but one of my friends wrote on this thing. So technically, you say little or no attention. And if in the course of your work, you found a work on terrorism and gender-based violence, and your work is also supposed to be on terrorism and gender-based violence, all you need to do is to look at that person's work and say, what did this person, is there anything this person did not see? It's possible that the person showed us how women are victims, blah, 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 but the person has not told us the psychological implication of it on women. When women are rescued from Boko Haram and they come with children, how does the society see these women? Maybe the person did not look at that angle. Reintegration. The children they come with, how do they cope with stigmatization? These are a lot of areas, psychological explanation that some persons may not even look at. And so you can even make sure to say, Murtala, though, looked at terrorism and gender-based violence, but from a more historical perspective. Right? You are trying to justify why you have to write that chapter, that topic. Okay? Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Now, for me, chapter 1, this is the only session in chapter 1 that requires you consulting anybody, any book, anywhere. The remaining item, you don't need to consult any books. Are we together? So left for me, apart from these 2 pages of statement and of introduction, the other components, you can finish them in 10 minutes. Yes, 10 minutes. Okay, let's try and see. 1 point what? 1.3. This is 401. 1.3. What's 1.3? Huh? 501, yes. I want to see 10 minutes. Let me see what we'll do in 10 minutes. 501. Okay, 1.3 is what? Research question. Okay, just take note of the time we use to finish the remaining item, okay? Research questions. This work, write it down, 1.3 research questions. Paragraph. This work will attempt to answer the following questions. This work will attempt to answer the following questions. Column. Number 1, use Roman numeral, okay? Number 1. Or use small letters. Is there a relationship between terrorism and gender-based violence? Is there a relationship between terrorism and gender-based violence? Is there a relationship between terrorism and gender-based violence? Number 2. In what way, open brackets, write S and close the brackets. In what way is gender-based violence manifested? In what way is gender-based violence manifested? Violence manifested. Number 3, are there implications of gender-based violence? Are there implications of gender-based violence? Are there implications of gender-based violence? Number 4, what strategies can be put in place?
What
Strategies can be put in place to address terrorism and gender-based violence. What strategies can be put in place to address terrorism and gender-based violence? One point 4, objective of the study. Objectives of the study. Paragraph. The broad objective of this study. The broad objective of this study is to interrogate. The broad objective of this study is to interrogate terrorism and gender-based violence in Nigeria. Is to interrogate terrorism and gender-based violence in Nigeria, using Borno State as a case in point. Using Borno State as a case in point. Full stop. The specific objectives, points. The specific objectives are column number 1, to identify the relationship with violence. To identify the relationship between terrorism and gender-based violence. Number 2, to ascertain and examine the manifestations of gender-based violence. To ascertain and examine the manifestations of gender-based with S, manifestations of gender-based violence. Of gender-based violence. Number 3, to interrogate the implications of gender-based violence. To interrogate the implications of gender-based violence. To interrogate the implications of gender-based violence. Are we there?
Yes.
Number 4, to proffer suggestions. To proffer suggestions or strategic recommendations. To proffer suggestions or strategic recommendations as to how to combat terrorism, as to how to combat terrorism, as to how to combat what? Terrorism and curb gender-based violence. GBV, that's what they call gender-based violence. Okay, GBV. Okay. Next, what's my next heading? 1.2 what now? 1.5.
Significance of the study.
Significance of the study. Significance of the study. This session is where every student must market your work. If you cannot market it well, it means even you are not convinced that your work is good or there's something important about this your project you want to write. Okay? Paragraph. The significance of this study cannot be overemphasized. The significance of this study cannot be overemphasized. As this study, the significance of this study cannot be overemphasized, as this study will enhance knowledge, solve perceived problems, and clear misperception. Solves perceived problems and what? Clear misperception. Full stop. Policymakers and the Nigerian defense architecture. Policymakers and the Nigerian defense architecture will find this work very useful. Policymakers and Nigeria's defense architecture will find this work very useful. Since it will not only examine terrorism and gender-based violence, but will prefer suggestions. On the way forward. Are we there?
Yes.
Full stop. Researchers and students, NGOs, and civil societies. Researchers and students, NGOs and civil societies will find this work very useful. As this work will be a source of secondary data, to both students and researchers. As this work will be a source of secondary data to both students and researchers who have interests in terrorism and gender. As this work will serve as a source of secondary data to both students and researchers who have interest in terrorism and gender. And gender-based violence, if you like. Okay. Paragraph. The significance of this study to the society. The significance of this study to the society is immense. The significance of this study to the society is immense. Full stop. It will not only bring about sensitization, and conscientization. It will not only bring about sensitization and conscientization, but it will serve as an eye-opener. Conscience, to conscientize people. Conscientization. It will serve as what? An eye-opener to the society. It will serve as an eye-opener to the society as far as gender-based violence is concerned. To serve as an eye-opener to the society as far as gender-based violence is concerned. As far as gender-based violence is concerned. Are we together? Just something like that, right? Now, the nature of your topic may change some variables in this our significance, right? So this is just generally to shape your mindset to know that whatever topic you pick, that session requires you to market it. Usually the external examiner will ask you, what is even the significance of this, your 200 pages that you have written? Sometimes you're expecting one serious question from the methodology or from somewhere, and the person just looks at you and say, what is the relevance of this your work? Educate us, please. And some students would have gone to cram their sample size, sampling technique, and they're asking you very simple questions. Or another question may be, why did you choose this topic out of several other topics? And like I said, you cannot be given more than 20 minutes to defend the project you have been writing for 2-3 years. So it means you should just know the key issues, and on the day of your defense, address these key issues. You are going to skip a lot of things. Skip literature review. Skip methodology. All you need to do is just to tell that this work is this. The work adopts interpretivism and positivism as its philosophy and is a survey research design. Simple. I move to the key issue. I move to my findings in my chapter 5. And in the course of this work, the work has discovered that a lot of effort is channeled on terrorism, counter-terrorism, with little attention on the connection between terrorism and gender-based violence. You can even bring statistics. I've kept her there. There's something about women
Sir, please, can we take it again? We lost you for a moment. Hello, sir. Please, doctor, can you take it all over? We lost you for a moment. Hello, sir. Doctor, we lost you for a moment. We are not following. Please. I think somebody left and we all got muted.
You're muted.
Now, good. What's the next now? 1.6. What's the heading? Research propositions.
Sorry, sir. Sir, we missed you for a moment. I think the whole of
Paragraph. The following propositions will guide.
The whole of 1.6, we didn't get to you. Something.
And situate this work in proper context. The following propositions will guide and situate this work in proper context. Context. XT. Column. Number 1. Gender-based violence cannot be unconnected with terrorism. Gender-based violence cannot be unconnected with terrorism. Number 2. You see, now I've forgotten. I'll go back to my number 2. What's my number 2 objective?
To ascertain and examine the manifestation.
Beautiful. So let's go to proposition 2. Gender-based violence. Number 2, gender-based violence is manifested in different forms. Gender-based violence is manifested in different forms. Gender-based violence is manifested in different forms. What's objective 3?
Interrogate the implications of gender-based.
Beautiful. Number 3, gender-based violence cannot be without implications. Gender-based violence cannot be without implications. Gender-based violence cannot be without implications. Number 4.
To provide suggestions on strategic recommendations as to how to combat terrorism and curb gender-based violence.
There are mechanisms that can be put in place. There are mechanisms that can be put in place to address gender-based violence, to address terrorism and gender-based violence. There are mechanisms that can be put in place to address terrorism and gender-based violence. Are we there?
No.
Very simple. Now, usually when you write, don't be too hard on yourself. Whatever the brain supplies, just write it down. Later, you go through it, and maybe the brain is more relaxed. You see yourself paraphrasing to make it more presentable. Okay? Very simple. So this is what we call research propositions or research assumption. Okay, it's an assumption. We are assuming that terrorism is connected to gender-based, or gender-based violence is connected to terrorism. We are assuming that there are several factors that lead to or there are several manifestations of gender-based violence. We are also assuming that there are some mechanisms you can put in place to address terrorism and gender-based violence. At the end of the work, we will now see these assumptions, whether they are true or they are not true. And that's what we call hypothesis in some instances. Because hypotheses are statements of guess. You cannot say it is valid. You cannot say it is invalid. You need to experiment it. And that's why in that your data analysis, that's the experimentation chapter. It will now tell us yes or no. Okay? Your assumptions may not be the way I put it. I can say there is a connection between terrorism and gender-based violence. That's still an assumption, right? What did I say in this one? What did we say? Number one, gender-based violence cannot be unconnected. So you can see, gender-based violence cannot be unconnected. And what they say, there is a connection. In all, though it looks in the positive, it is still an assumption until we finish the job. Okay? 1.7.
Yes.
Somebody? Okay, please.
Looking at the assumption as if you are already positioning yourself with a bias feeling over what the outcome of the research will look like.
Okay. Yes, it may look like that. And that's why if I call that hypothesis, for each of the proposition, I'll have two. I will say there is a relationship between terrorism and gender-based violence. I will not say there is no relationship between terrorism and gender-based violence. The next one will say gender-based violence is manifested in different ways. The next will say gender-based violence is not manifested. So in all, they still remain assumption. It does that the assumption look in the affirmative, but it is an assumption because the title of that heading says assumption. Okay? Yes, please.
I think I want to still want some data more. If you say there is, that's you're saying with certainty.
Is
certainty.
Yes.
Of course, then under that, then the topic on the heading there is assumptions and preposition. And there's a difference when you say cannot be unconnected. That is, you don't want to give an affirmative thing than when you say there is. I think we should look at.
Okay, I understand. But if I say cannot be unconnected, I am firmly telling you that it is connected. If I sound more authoritative.
No. I mean, it gives room for.
It gives room for some brainstorming.
Exactly. But if you say there is, my name is this, does not change it.
Beautiful.
My name might be.
Beautiful. So, like I said, use your discretion and make an assumption. That's why a proposition is a statement that only gives more idea to the work, right? But whatever you have done, you are just assuming. We find out at the end whether that assumption is positive or it is negative. And to just add to this observation, if you go to the research questions, you will see that I try to minimize the use of words. I think what appeared only once somewhere in that research, in all of those research questions. Because if you use word, it sounds too straightforward. It doesn't give the reader an ability to even think one or two before he arrives at a conclusion. But when you say, is there a relationship? The reader needs to first establish that there is a relationship before the nature of the relationship. But when you say, what is the relationship? They have already told the reader that there is a relationship. So we try to minimize what. What sounds too elementary, it doesn't give any room for critical thinking. Okay? Are we making progress? Yes, please.
Under research question specific objective.
Yes.
And then the proposition. Are we looking? There are many points from this case. Are we looking at minimum or maximum from this case?
Okay. Research question. I will advise you don't have more than 5.
Maximum.
Yes. Remember, I said that question is an assignment you are giving to yourself. The more assignment you give to yourself, the more work you are going to do. Because in your discussion of findings in that chapter 5, what I will do is just to go and pull out your research question and I'll hold it. And I say, question 1, you say to do this. Where is it in this? What did you find out? So if I have 10 questions, I want to see 10 findings and discussion on 10 of the findings. Each of them, and please note, those findings, a student cannot just say discussion of findings and begin to speak English. You say discussion of findings. You don't say this session is geared towards discussing the findings of the research. You don't say discussion of findings on the relationship between terrorism and gender-based violence. Speak all the English. Discussion of findings on the manifestations of gender-based. Speak all the English. Discussion of findings on, what's the other one? On the implications of gender-based violence, we want to see. So if you have 10, we must see 10 discussions. And when we say discussion, it doesn't mean that I say now write 2 lines. We have not discussed anything now. And remember that discussion is being enhanced by the data you have analyzed. When I gave out questionnaire and I say, is there a connection between terrorism and gender-based violence? And 60 out of 100 say, yes, there is a connection. I agree there's a connection. 20 say they don't agree that there's a connection. 15 say they are not sure whether there is a connection. And you analyze that when you're interpreting your data. I'll now say the work finds out that there is a connection between terrorism and gender-based violence. As seen in table 2.this in another session, 50% of the respondents agreed or strongly agreed that there's a relationship between terrorism and gender-based violence. In fact, in the various interviews and focus group discussion, most of the discussants and respondents also were affirmative that there's a connection between terrorism and gender-based violence. Right? You cannot begin to give us instance of Chibok schoolgirls, the ones returning with pregnancy, the ones we are now discussing. Right? So you will decide whether you want to give yourself more work or less work. Okay? You know, and the thing goes on is a cycle. If I have only 4 questions and I want to interview somebody, 4 questions, the person finishes, I find my way and go. You get 10 questions, you need to wait. And you know what the person says, they are going to transcribe it. Thank God for all this transcription now. You just put electronically, as the audio is playing, the thing is typing it out for you. But remember that sometimes the person will talk off point.
Yes.
And tell you his story when he was in Dapchi there, he was a commander there, this and that. All those ones, we don't need it for that project. So imagine that I'm telling you, end up doing more than 1 hour, somebody is just telling you plenty story, and it's only 2 paragraphs you are looking for from that person. Keep the question simple and short.
So what is the list?
Don't do more than 5. Don't do less than 4. There are some topics that are so unique that I can even have 3 questions. And out of those 3 questions, you can't bring any other question there that will fit in because the topic is so unique. And those 3 questions will address holistically what you want to achieve. Okay?
Yes.
Good. 1.7. What's that 1.47? Scope, right? Scope and limitation. Paragraph. This work centers on terrorism and gender-based violence. This work centers on terrorism and gender-based violence using Maiduguri as a case study. between 2009 to 2023. Between 2009 to 2023. Full stop. The choice of this period, lies in the fact that terrorism effectively began in Nigeria in 2009. Terrorism effectively began in Nigeria in 2009 and has existed up to 2023. Up to 2023. Full stop. It's also important to note that this period captures the regime, let's call it administration, the administration of both President Goodluck Jonathan. This period captures the administration of both President Goodluck Jonathan and President Muhammadu Buhari. If I like, when I say Jonathan, I open bracket. Jonathan came up in what year? But Jonathan was 2009 to 2015, right?
No, Jonathan started 2010.
2010, but completed Yaradua's
Yes.
tenure. Therefore, we can take that 2009. Okay, we'll say 2009 to 2015 in brackets. We'll now say President Muhammadu Buhari's administration. We'll now say 2015 to what? 23. Okay. Are we together? Every period you pick, please justify it. There must be something about that time frame. You must justify it. So don't just give your supervisor a topic and you put year because everybody's putting years. There's something about that year. You must justify it. Okay? What we have just done now is to justify our own. We say we want to look at the effort of government under Buhari, terrorism under Goodluck and terrorism under Buhari. Right? And we have to even make the argument more authentic. We are saying Boko Haram started in 2009. So we are looking at it from that period. Yes, please.
Sir, you mentioned Maiduguri. Is terrorism only in Maiduguri town? Maiduguri is a town.
No. Borno State. Borno State. Borno State. Okay? Borno State. Okay? Borno State. Are we okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. If you look at what I've given you, if you type it, it may give you less than 2 paragraphs. A PhD work cannot have 2 paragraphs under scope. It means something is wrong. What you need to do now is to embellish that session. Scope means area of coverage. Now, I've told you that this work centers on this, and I told you the period, and I've justified the period. What I'll do now is to try imagining, having a mental picture of what I'm going to write in the work. I'll now say this work is going to, let's just take 1 or 2 examples. This work will interrogate the origin. It will interrogate the origin, ideology, financing, and strategies of terrorism in Nigeria. And strategies of terrorism in Nigeria. Full stop. It will also identify the various ways through which gender-based violence is manifested, the various ways through which gender-based violence is manifested, and the implications of gender-based violence for women. And the implication of gender-based violence for women. Okay? Something like that. Before you know it, you have like more than half a page. You said? Okay? Implications of gender-based violence for women. Don't just write that first paragraph and leave it. No, expand it. Okay? Let's expand it. Holistically, this is your scope. You touch this, touch that, touch that, touch that, and that is good to go. What's the next item? Limitations. Okay? We have not mentioned the limitation components in that same angle. So when you finish your, now what we do or what we advise students to do now, if you go to your chapter 3, you will see methodological limitations. If you have that, you go back and change that to 1 point. What is that? 1.8. Just call it scope of the study. Because there will be no point telling us the limitations, and later you are still telling us the limitations in chapter 3. Okay? So just call it scope of the study. Of the study.
Scope of the study.
Yes, scope of the study.
Yes. I wanted to say that the period, I think, actually give us the limit of.
Yes, it gives us the limit, but in the context of limitations, we're talking about challenges, constraints that you encountered while carrying out the work. Are we together? Yes, please.
Does anybody have type C charger? Those people online will go offline.
Okay, are we there? So scope of the study, that's the scope. Okay, then the next item is definition of terms. 1.8 definition of terms. Right, terrorism under it. Terrorism under it. Right, gender-based violence under terrorism. Gender-based violence. Okay, under that, right, human security. Human security. Simple. All I will do is to tell you the meaning of these 3 things. Remember that human security does not appear in my topic, but in the body of the work, it will appear severally, so I need to clarify it. Okay? All you need to do is define terrorism according to 2 scholars. You have finished that one. Define gender-based violence according to 2 scholars. You have finished that one. Define human security according to 2 scholars. You have finished that. Are we together? And it's very simple. Just go and type meaning of human security. I look at the work, I take 2 and put it there. Reference them. That's all.
She wish you had not taken us
Are we there? Now we have 2 things. I want us to note something about that definition of terms. In some work, you will see what we call